Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of the Frogcast Kambo Convos, where we talk about all things Kambo. We're kind of obsessed. And I have an awesome guest today, Jetta Blaine, and she's going to talk about the importance of trauma-informed care in the Kambo space, which I think is a totally neglected topic that really is so imperative for people to address and to take seriously. So let's give you a little background on who Jetta is and why she's such an epic speaker for this topic. So Jetta is a trauma-informed Kambo practitioner, Thai massage therapist, and wellness guide dedicated to helping clients transition from stagnancy to vibrant liberation and conscious creation. Through her integrative and customized approach, Jetta works with individuals from all walks of life to foster joyous, empowered living by bridging the gap between the conscious and subconscious minds, aligning all parts of the self toward greater wholeness. To date, Jetta has served Kambo to about 500 individuals of all backgrounds and ailments. Her work seamlessly weaves with modern practices like neuroscience, somatics, and hypnosis, with ancient wisdom rooted in shamanism, yogic philosophy, and sacred ceremony. This unique blend enables her to provide an unparalleled, integrated approach to wellness, personal development, and post traumatic growth. Jetta's journey into healing began as a deeply personal quest. After decades of struggling with severe depression, PTSD, eating disorders, and debilitating physical pain, she traveled the world, immersing herself in different healing practices. Through her exploration, she discovered powerful modalities that guided her from darkness to light, tools that she shares with her clients today. Passionate about creating safe, trauma informed spaces, Jetta empowers her clients to embody their magnificence and reclaim their lives with clarity, purpose, and joy. What an inspiring bio. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Jetta. Jetta, thank you so much for showing up for this conversation today.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you for having me, Caitlin. It's just always such an honor to be able to collaborate with you. And I just love everything that you do with Medicine Frog Combo. So to be included in your community is just the highest compliment.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise, it's such a joy to be able to have a conversation with you and share it with others. First and foremost, I mean, I gave a little bit of background, from your bio, but obviously that just touches the surface. What really inspired you to go deeper into trauma-informed care and, working with people who have experienced trauma?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what inspired me to get into studying trauma and learning about trauma-informed care and ultimately facilitating what I like to call post-traumatic growth, which is when we get to the other side of the trauma that we experience, we're able to often integrate the lessons that we've received, the empowerment that we've received, and trauma can really open the door for us to almost kind of like get superpowers in some ways if used properly. And we can talk a little bit about that later on. But there can be a lot of really wonderful things that can come on the other side of that healing journey. And I basically got into it through my own process. I felt like when I would often go to medicine journeys, like I wasn't held in the ways that I needed to be held. I would be processing so much deeply rooted fear and terror, and a lot would come up in regards to my first decade or my first 2 decades of life where I experienced a certain level of hardship and difficulty. And I always just felt like something was missing. And at times I had to ask myself the question, like, okay, are sitting with medicine is going through different ceremonies. Is this actually beneficial and healing for me? Or is this something that's just opening a wound and is that wound just festering? I don't know. And so I continued to go to journeys, but I also started to learn about post-traumatic growth and about trauma-informed care and could see the different ways like that I needed to be held that just wasn't offered because it wasn't known or taught about with different practitioners that I had sat with, not just with combo, but with other medicines as well.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. There's definitely a gap in a lot of, medicine facilitation where there's just an unawareness of just how potent someone's pre-existing traumatic patterns can still be affecting them and change the outcome of how they're relating to a medicine, right? So, what what can happen if a facilitator isn't trauma informed? Like, what are the risks of, someone serving a medicine to a participant without being fully aware of the effects of trauma on someone?
That's a great question. The biggest thing is re-traumatization. So basically, somebody comes in, they've experienced a baseline level of trauma, they go to sit with the medicine. Medicine is intense, right? Combo is an intense experience for most of us, if not for all of us. And trauma or combo also has the power of putting us back in our body, whereas trauma often takes us out of our body. It creates a certain level of dissociation. And so when you go to sit with combo and you're put back into your body, you're back associated in your body, it can be overwhelming because all these different thoughts, memories, and sensations can begin to well up to the conscious mind and begin to well up to the surface. And it really requires specialized knowledge to know how to move with this energy. I know a big thing that I experienced, I'm very sensitive, and with many different medicine practitioners that I had sat with, the answer always seemed to be more medicine, more medicine, more medicine, which was overwhelming for my nervous system and which didn't seem like it was actually serving me in the ways that I needed. In many ways, I needed less medicine. I needed something that could kind of like warm up my nervous system, that my body could get trust with so that I could go deep instead of slamming me into just extreme overwhelm with the medicine experience when I was already living in overwhelm because of this baseline level of trauma. So one is just knowing what dosage to give to somebody. One is knowing how to read the signs that their nervous system is in a hyperactive state, how to calm them down, how to get them more regulated. And this isn't just to receive medicine, but around the ceremony itself, because it leads to a much smoother medicine ceremony and to better integration on the other side, too. It can also facilitate trust when people are trauma informed, when they know the proper words, vocabulary to use with somebody who is in this state, and ultimately to bring them into a place of empowerment. Whereas if trauma informed care is lacking, it can be really easy to actually disempower a person because we might not understand why they're having the experience they're having, why they're having such a strong reaction, what is actually going on for them. We don't quite understand where their consciousness is in regards to in their body or out of their body. So there's several things.
Yeah, you touched on so many important points. And I think you and I are very much in agreement. We've arrived at similar conclusions just around the importance of creating a trauma sensitive container and facilitation. What's the working for, like, presence. I've, seen, and I'm sure you have too, that, yeah, working with much like lower doses is a great step in making the medicine experience more manageable for people. And what I found is when people are taking high doses of medicine or they're in these, kind of cowboy facilitated experiences where there's not a lot of sensitivity or attunement happening from the provider, people do contract because they don't feel safe and they go back into their trauma responses, and then they develop this hypervigilance. And I've seen that actually really change the physiology of the medicine. Like, I do think there is a stark difference in the physical effects and potency in the medicine, and also the accessibility that the person has to relating to the medicine in a way that's healing and productive. And it's really amazing, the changes in how effective a Kambo experience can be for someone based on the container and the facilitation style, and whether it is sensitive to a person who might be stuck in a hypervigilant sympathetic stress response, which is basically a hallmark of trauma. So yeah, I agree with you completely. And I think, that's something that needs to be talked about more, is like the importance of the facilitation and the energy and the presence and the awareness of the provider, because that can really make or break an experience, from my opinion, of just, having seen and heard so many stories of people that go to different providers and they just get these monumental amounts of medicine slapped on them, and then they're hanging on for dear life, and it's just reinforcing all these traumatic patternings of survival and getting through traumatic experiences by just bracing against them and creating walls, which is quite counterproductive to what that person is trying to do, which, like you said, is to become embodied and reconnect to their somatic sensitivity, right?
Totally, totally. And I love that you say that because trauma ultimately desensitizes us. And it can get us kind of like, I don't mean this might come out in a negative way, so I'm trying to be choosy with my words here, but we can get kind of addicted to intensity as a result. And it's not like a mental thing, it's like a body thing. The body is always seeking homeostasis, it's always seeking to remain the same. And we talk about trauma oftentimes as a mental state, or we're in these traumatic loops, we're reliving this trauma, but trauma is very much so a physical state of your body. It is a state of hyperarousal in your body. It is an increased level of stress hormones. Increasing these stress hormones shuts down other areas of your body, like it shuts down your digestive tract. It's a reason why a lot of people who have experienced a certain level of traumatic events can oftentimes have digestive issues and why they're so common. It's one of the first things our body does when we get to a stress state. Oop, we shut down digestion. Why? Because if we're getting chased by a tiger or a lion, we don't need to worry about digesting our food. We just need to get the heck out of there, right? Stress is a physical state of the body. And Kambo can be such an amazing tool for bringing that state from here down here. Now, like I mentioned, though, the body is always seeking homeostasis. So if we're living up here all the time, if we have been living up here for a very long time, or if when we were being raised, our parents were living up here in regards to their stress hormones and their stress state of their body, it's likely that we are also living up here because our nervous systems adapted to that of our caregivers over our first 7 years of life. If we never had a chance to learn how to bring our baseline level of stress from here down to here, it's likely we're still living at it with at least this level or maybe higher, depending on what life experiences we've had. And so, the problem is, okay, if we're up here, body seeking homeostasis, the body's going to look for things that keeps it up here, you know? And there's other reasons why I think that there's an issue of addiction to intensity out there. I think part of it is media and other things that we watch and that we expose ourselves to. There's a lot of intensity out there. And I think with Kambo can be a really wonderful opportunity to have an experience where it can be more gentle, it can be perhaps more subtle, it can be a layered treatment. We can gain that trust in the body. So we're not like up here with our stress and we're staying up here or getting shot up here to like a 20 and then like getting brought, but maybe back down into a more parasympathetic state. Um, I find that if I have somebody who is in a very heightened sympathetic state when it comes to receiving medicine and they come in for a ceremony, often a layered treatment is really good because it facilitates that trust. Talking to them beforehand, doing some breath work, light breath work, I will say, nothing super intense. We're not doing holotropic breathing or anything like that, but like box breathing, something really simple to bring the nervous system down. That can all be immensely helpful for bringing them down here. And then after the medicine comes off, oftentimes they experience what could be their first experience of being in an actual parasympathetic state. It's wild.
Yeah, and I think it's really crucial for practitioners to be aware of, what you described as this like addiction to intensity because sometimes people they actually can experience withdrawals when life gets calm because they're so attached to the familiarity of that heightened stress response state, both on a physiological and psychological level. But they actually do when life calms down, they do actually experience withdrawals, and then it feels really boring. And then sometimes they sabotage their stable, period or stable relationships or whatever because they are familiar with these like chaotic, volatile spikes in cortisol, etc. And sometimes these people will actually seek out intense medicine experiences because they're trying to solve the problem with the same mentality that's creating the problem, which it's counterproductive and perhaps counterintuitive. But as a practitioner, it's good to be aware that this is a potential pattern that your clients in a traumatic response might actually seek to perpetuate traumatizing themselves by having these intense experiences with medicines. And so they're the ones that really the most need a more sensitive and gentle approach, because even though they might not like the idea of it, I found it's actually what people need generally, is to not just disassociate into the survival mode, but to actually learn how to be present and in that parasympathetic relaxation response, while facing discomfort and physical sensations that pull them back in to their bodies. So yeah, I think everything you said is just like spot on and really, really valuable. So another question I have is, you know, sometimes people are very open about sharing about their traumatic history, etc. But sometimes people are also very private, or they might also not have a clarity on why they have arrived to a Kambo session, or they might not even be considering their past experiences as traumatic or relevant to why they want to do Kambo. So, what sort of signs do you look for in a person, or in a process, that can give you a clue that this person may require more attunement and just a protocol adaptation given a history of trauma or a presentation of traumatic patterning?
That's a great question. So I have a couple of different methods that I kind of pre-screen or screen people. One is my waiver that I have people fill out is pretty extensive. It goes over medical history and stuff like that, but it also has some more personal questions that I invite people to bring in. And oftentimes they're quite honest with why it is they're wanting to receive combo. Um, I'm I'm pretty vocal about being a trauma-informed care provider when it comes to serving medicine. And so I tend to attract a lot of people who are seeking post-traumatic growth. But if people aren't necessarily upfront about what they've gone through, which it makes sense if they're not, I totally get it. We live in a very shame-based culture where we often make the victims wrong, or there's a lot of stuff out there in New Age spirituality on victim consciousness. But when it comes down to it, many people who have experienced trauma, they are victims. And it's not in a disempowered way. It just means that somebody who had more power than you in the situation, leveraged that power over you, oftentimes, in ways that was unconsensual, or you were informed for. So I feel the need to speak about that for just a moment and to mention it.
Please.
Um, yeah, it's so much of it is just like relieving people of their shame for their experiences, and making it like, yeah, we've all gone through difficult and challenging experiences. It might not be the same as what you've experienced, but we all kind of feel the same things when it comes down to it in this world, just in different manifestations. So there's a lot of work I do over just exposing shame and like normalizing experiences that we have to bring people into a more empowered state. But anyways, if somebody's feeling a lot of shame over their experiences, they might not be as upfront about what they've gone through, or sometimes they're not aware that they're in a state of hyperarousal. They're not aware that they're in a state of dissociation. They're not aware that, an experience that they had created so much internally for them. They might be distracted, or they might not have been given the proper support that they need to actually go into what that experience might have created for them. And so there are a couple of things I look for. One is their posture and how they are when they show up in ceremony. Different things like stuttering a lot can be a sign of having received trauma, or like second guessing yourself while you're talking, being overly apologetic, like saying, oh, I'm sorry all the time. That's a big sign of having experienced a certain level of trauma. Different ways that resistance can show up with the medicine, different ways that fear can show up with the medicine. And it can show up in either way. Like it can be like somebody's there and they're like, I'm ready to go and I want 12 points of medicine and we're going deep. Like, okay, like let's slow down a minute and let's peel back some layers and see what's going on here. But that can also be a sign of trauma, people who are like really upfront and ready to go and a bit overzealous too. There's different ways it presents itself, right? Um, a lot is in like, do they seem really nervous? Which most people are nervous when they go into combo. Combo is an extreme experience for a lot of us, right? Like we mentioned. But if somebody's like shaking, or if their eyes are darting all over the place, if they are if they're showing signs of hypervigilance, that's a pretty good sign that they've experienced a certain level of hyperarousal in their life, or that they're in a state of hyperarousal. So those are just a few things that I look for. I'm checking in with myself to see if there's anything else that I want to attest to that I feel is important to mention here about that. No, those are the big things. Actually, what I will say is like another thing is when stating intention. Like a lot of people will know what they don't want, or they'll show up and like, I don't want this relationship pattern I've been in anymore. I don't want this job anymore. I don't want. They don't know what they do want,
Mm.
and that can be a state that can show a lot, because trauma, what it does is it distorts your reality. It can make your worldview very, very narrow because of a certain amount of heaviness or hardship we've experienced, right? We're in a state of protection, we're in a state of contraction when we're in hyperarousal or hypoarousal. We're wanting to be more protected. And so with that can come a certain narrowing of what we think is possible for us, when really so much is possible for us. It's wild. Um, but if people don't know that they can access a healthy relationship, they'll say, "Oh, I don't want this unhealthy relationship," but they won't say, "I want a healthy one." That what ultimately, like, what we're looking at consistently is what we're creating in our lives. And so it can also be working with people to spot that and just see if you can open them up to more positive possibilities, which some people aren't actually up for that, because they just have been in such a state where they don't think it's possible. Or some people are like, wow, I never thought about it like that. What do I want? It can be pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, and it's like, is the person moving away from fear, something that they don't like, that they're averse to, or are they moving towards love? Because I feel like, fear and love are they're a very simplified way of kind of looking at, like, is that person open and expanded or contracted? And that can often be like an indicator and reveal what's motivating movement where. So that's really fascinating. And I want to also circle back to something else that I think is really key, which is, the victim mindset. And this can be tricky because, like you said, often there is a legitimate, victim experience where someone violated that person and it was not okay. And that truly makes them a victim. But then you can get this like learned helplessness, right? And we know from like rat studies the effects of learned helplessness, where once an organism or a human learns that they are helpless and that they can't actually control or have any agency in stopping themselves from being hurt or violated or exploited or abused by someone, their brain actually changes, and then they have all these different neurological patterns and behavioral patterns that result. And that's essentially what trauma does, right, to a person as well, not just a rat. And what I found is that the one of the critical pieces is restoring a sense of empowerment and agency. So, like
Mm,
you said, it's not about gaslighting and being like toxically positive and not acknowledging that, like, actually someone did me dirty. It was not okay. You can still own the reality of that, like that you were a victim of something. But I think there is a key kind of turning point in escaping the victim mentality, where you actually reclaim your power and your autonomy and gain some sense of control over your life again. And I've found that that is a critical moment, a pivotal moment in people's post traumatic growth that's really essential. And doing things like Kambo, where you're kind of using it as a tool, almost like a weight at a gym, where you're adding this like stress and difficulty, but then within a container and a circumstance that you get to actually craft the meaning, and be fully empowered because you made that choice to put yourself through that ordeal. At any point, you can come out of that ordeal, and And I think it really allows people to rewrite narratives about being disempowered and then reclaim that power. So, yeah, I know I kind of just said a lot, but I'm curious like what your thoughts and opinions on, being empowered and also other like key components of post-traumatic growth. What do you think is essential to that whole formula of allowing someone to emerge from a traumatic state?
I love this question. I love everything that you just said, and it really matches my sentiments and how I approach the medicine as well. I just think like what greater thing to empower somebody than a warrior's medicine, right? Kambo's warrior medicine. It's not for the faint of heart. It's a warrior medicine down in the Amazon too. And so, what a wonderful way to get somebody into a more empowered place. What I can say too is that there is something to be said for willingly putting yourself through discomfort because you know it is good for you. You know, we reach peace discomfort in Kambo and we're like, how did we do this? Or why did we do this? Or why did I do this again? When we're coming into a state of also like more of a parasympathetic state with the medicine as it comes off or as we come down from it, when we're able to get some of that mental clarity that arises when we're in a parasympathetic state, that is empowering. And then Kambo makes you feel, oftentimes, most times, really amazing afterwards, really vital, feeling good in your body. You have greater mental clarity. You have better awareness over what to put in your body or not put in your body. It's really great at teaching people boundaries. I've noticed it's great boundary medicine. The body will let you know if somebody's overstepping something and will oftentimes give you the power to vocalize and say, no, no more. I'm done with this. I'm going this way. Um, I was talking to a friend last night and we were talking about treating trauma. He's starting a retreat center and wanted to know a couple of things about it. And he's like, I find that therapy, people oftentimes just judge things up and then they're just talking and judging the thing up over and over and over again. He's like, I feel like it's more empowering to focus on where you're going and to just create those new neural pathways and those new habits and structures. And I was like, it's a little bit of both that we want to find. We ultimately want to have time and space to feel the emotions, to grieve whatever was lost through a traumatic experience, or how much that traumatic experience has oftentimes taken from somebody over the years. We want to acknowledge the pain that's organically there. I think that not enough space is given for people to really process what they've gone through. And then through that process, you can find the light. And for me, finding the light can be having some kind of ceremony to honor that pain, like a Kambo ceremony, but there are other ones too. Um, there's so many different ways that we can imbibe ceremony into our lives in order to live more holistic and just more well overall. But having something that kind of marks, okay, like this is what this has been like. This is the ways that I see it affects my life. This is how I have greater awareness over it. This is how I come back into a calm state within my body. And then this is how I move forward with a couple of these new things that I'm getting from this medicine journey. And this is one of the best things about post-traumatic growth is because we can get a lot of positive things from having experienced trauma in our lives. Um, it's a little edgy to say that, because trauma can be so disempowering, but oftentimes people I know who have gone through trauma, they are some of the most compassionate individuals. They can be so attuned to and aware of really subtle aspects of life or the universe or of community. They can become attuned in a way that's really special and almost kind of like a superpower. They can pick up on things. Um, so it's about that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
And yeah, I want to talk more about like, these superpowers, because I think a lot of times we can demonize coping mechanisms, right? And that there's reason for that. They're generally not sustainable long term, and they have other costs. But I think sometimes we forget that they actually are there to help us. It's our body and our psyche's way of preserving us and loving us and trying to help us survive a hostile environment or set of circumstances. And there actually is usefulness for these emergent behaviors or sensitivities or mechanisms that come out when we are exposed to trauma. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. Like, what I mean, you kind of touched on it already, but like, yeah, what are the sort of like responses to trauma and how does that help us and how does that hurt us?
That's a great question. So, what I will say is being at war with yourself is the most corrosive thing, right? Being at war with yourself is the most corrosive thing. The ways that we make ourselves wrong for things, the ways that we embody shame that was given to us. I talk about shame a lot, and healthy shame is like, okay, I did something to a friend that was out of integrity and I apologize to them and the shame goes away. If I say something that was insensitive to somebody, oh, I feel shame. I'm going to go. Rectify this and then the shame goes away. That's healthy shame. Unhealthy shame is the shame that sticks around for a long time. And it usually doesn't come from inside of us. It's indoctrinated in our system or in our society from, you know, many aspects from religion, from public school and private school systems, from caregivers, all kinds of places. And it's just kind of the way the culture has grown. Coping mechanisms, I feel, really deserve a lot of sensitivity to be held around them and a lot of compassion to be held around them. I know in my personal experience, I really struggled with binge eating and then with purging for a long time. And like my weight yo-yoed for years, and it was something that I really did behind closed doors. And it got to the point where, I was doing all this research on it, and everything I was seeing was like, oh, people can't recover from eating disorders. It's not possible. And I just didn't believe that. I've always felt like there's been a way to heal like everything I've experienced in life. Like, I don't know where I got that from, but thank God I have it because I've found some weird ways like Kambo that really helps. But I remember I was going through an episode where I was having a really hard time binge eating, and some of my binge eating episodes would last for days and days and days, and I would spend a bunch of money and like destroy my digestive tract, and all these things would happen. And there was one time where I was like, what if I just don't make myself wrong for this? And what if I like actually try to enjoy the fact that I'm having this experience? Basically, what I was doing is instead of becoming dissociated up here, using it as a tool to dissociate and leave my body, I was like, what if I stay present? What if I stay present in my body while I'm doing this? And that was the last time I ever had an episode. And this was
Wow.
years ago. Yeah, years ago. This is about 6 years ago. And what I learned and what I felt was like, oh, I really feel how this is making me feel physically. And I'm also realizing it's not actually helping my situation. It was like a crazy moment of clarity, like a crazy moment of clarity. And then just it was just like, this is like a decade of like pain that I was carrying with this thing that I kept secret and would do behind closed doors to cope with life. And once I released the shame around it, it was just like, and I learned like, oh yeah, this is something. And what's interesting is there were a couple times I would feel that urge to go and to have a binge eating experience. And then it kind of became like my canary in a coal mine where I would just be like, wait, something something wants my attention. I'm not paying attention to something in my life. Like I'm having this urge. There's a reason for it. And I was able to use it to kind of help me navigate what was for me and not for me or how to set boundaries. So it ended up becoming a friend, this coping mechanism that I demonized. So I love that you mentioned that. And just wanted to speak to that for a moment.
Wow, what an amazing story. That's like such a great example of how literally just consciously changing the narrative and shifting awareness about like the behavior or the act of binge eating, like that's all it took. And you didn't even like have to stop binge eating in that moment. You were just like, fuck it. What if I just enjoyed this? What if I like celebrated eating all this awesome food? And then you're like, actually, this isn't as cool as I thought it was. And yeah, I like how like you can use a coping method or an impulse to engage in that coping behavior as a clue that something has got me dysregulated, right? Like I'm not feeling entirely settled and safe in my body, and the protective mechanisms are starting to show up. How can they teach me and help me develop this like heightened awareness of, ooh, something is out of balance in me. Let's explore deeper. And I think that's just like so cool. And that is really truly like when you apply mindfulness to, these seemingly like all-encompassing behaviors that can feel like they take control and hijack people's willpower. How can you actually like learn from them and become allies with them, like you said? I think that's really sophisticated and allows for a lot of really deep exploration into like the root causes of these thoughts and feelings and behaviors as they come up. One question I have is, we talked about like how people are in these hyper arousal states, and that's, a keystone piece of a traumatized nervous system. And when you do start guiding or supporting someone in cultivating an ability to flip into a parasympathetic response, a rest, relaxation, safety response, what can be the consequences of that? Like, have you found that that can be like opening a can of worms and then suddenly people have all this access to like their pain and their memories and it can flood out and be like disruptive? Have you had that experience, or what do you feel happens when people do finally make that switch into feeling safe and relaxed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think of the term healing crisis that can definitely happen where it's like we have all this newfound awareness and it's something that can be beautifully healing, but it can be a lot. I remember after the second time I sat with Kambo, um, I felt like my soul was fractured and I was in pain for like 5 days. Like I just realized like all these intense things I had been through in my life felt like parts of my soul were missing and it was so painful. And I was lucky at the time. I reached out to just a lot of my teachers that I have who just held me and were just like, you just gotta get through it and just feel into what it has for you. There's so much medicine that is there, and just being in our heart space and being in our feeling space as we go through these newfound awarenesses and as they come up. But I have seen that happen with Kambo a couple of times. Once we're in the parasympathetic state, our mind is talking better to itself, and things that we've previously blocked out can make themselves known, or different ways that we've narrowed our world view can be blasted open. It can show itself in different ways too. I remember I had a client one time, she called me and she's like, I feel like the world is making love to me and it's really overwhelming and I don't know what to do. Um, and I just told her to lay in the grass and she's like, thank you. But there's different things that we can definitely do as practitioners, and the first thing to do is informed consent, like letting people know like this can happen, like embarking on this journey, things can make itself known. It is possible. So that way they're not totally blindsided by it. Now, being told something and experiencing something is way different, way different. And so it's really important to know as practitioners, like what we have the capability to do in regards of treating somebody or holding space for them, remembering like we are not licensed professionals, like we are Kambo practitioners, unless you're a licensed professional. And there are some Kambo practitioners who are licensed professionals. I've known some of them, I've sat with some of them. But it's important to have a strong network of people that you can refer people to. I have like a whole list if somebody needs additional care. I have ones that are very cost effective for people. I have ones that are more specialized. But I find oftentimes, as long as I'm able to maintain my still point, my groundedness while talking and working with somebody, literally just while holding the space around them, it can create a much healthier and kind of like safe feeling environment for them to go through their process, and just showing up and letting them know that they're not alone. They have an ally. That ally is you. You're there to witness them and you're there to help them within your capability and your ability. That goes a long way. Um, I've only seen it happen like a couple of times with people who have an overwhelming amount of things come up. It's not what I find that the super norm is, but it's definitely a thing.
Yeah, and informed consent and aftercare are so critical because, Kambo can be very disruptive. I think some people expect that they're gonna just have this immediate afterglow and gonna wanna go run up a mountain, but as you and I and many other Kambo enthusiasts know, it can actually be very disorienting, and so I always let people know that that is possible, and sometimes, you know, this can be like crisis medicine. I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people who come to Kambo in crisis, and they have that ASAP energy. They're like, "I need Kambo tomorrow." And they're in these like transitional states and they feel dysregulated, or for whatever reason they feel that like Kambo is critical to alchemizing whatever life transition that they're in. And it is beautiful for that. It's very useful. But I tell people sometimes Kambo can bulldoze your cottage to build your castle. And definitely in my life and many other people that I've seen, um, it can suddenly feel like everything's falling apart, which is part of the magic and the terror of Kambo. Is like you're looking around and you're like, wait, how is it that this like internal process that I had that's not psychedelic, um, seems to create these like massive ripples in the space-time continuum around you, and all of these like things that are seemingly external to you and your combo experience feel intricately tied to it in a way that's so undeniable, and everybody feels it, right? It's part of like the weird secret of combo. You're like, what is that? um but it does, like, yeah, you start having these weird things like relationships end, you lose your job, or you just get so fed up that you cannot bear to go to your job anymore. These are just examples where people just get this clarity once they have kind of snapped out of their hypervigilant state, and suddenly they're like disoriented, and they they also just see that they can't continue on the ways that they have been. And once you see that, it's really hard to play along, and I feel like it all just falls apart because you sabotage it because you're like, I don't want this anymore. um but yeah, I think it can be very, very, kind of like call-y, destructive sometimes.
Yeah.
But then continues to guide people in rebuilding and kind of being reborn from the ashes. So I think it's very catalytic in that way. But if people aren't prepared for that, that can be really scary and confusing, and feel like Campbell ruined their life or whatever. And so as a practitioner, I think it's important to let people know that this is kind of a common property of the experience, and to just trust in the process, and to like wait it out, and again, like, have that empowered narrative about like, this is happening for me. I might not understand the destruction of this yet, but it is moving in a direction that is ultimately creating a better and more aligned life for myself. But it can be hard if people don't have that type of deep trust in spirit already. I don't know. Have you seen that happen before for people?
Totally, totally. What I tell people is, as you change your inner world, your outer world also begins to shift. And so pay attention to the new things that come in, but also pay attention to what falls away. And I always tell people, if something's falling away, it's important to grieve it and to experience the loss of whatever it is that's falling away. But ultimately, it's here to bring you into something better. I love that interpretation that you have, bulldozing the cottage to build the castle. Kambo is seen as a heart medicine. It's a heart opener, and we can talk about many different spiritual groups and how they view opening of the heart and living in the heart space. And it's such a magical place to be in. But if we've been living just out of alignment for so long, if our trauma has really distorted us to this really narrow way of being where we don't think it's possible or like we're worth having, some of the more magical things of life, when we get blasted open, a lot of those things in that narrow framework can definitely fall away. I always tell people, Kambo made me homeless because I had a wild experience with housing and Kambo, and just like, and then like lived in my car for a while and was serving Kambo all around the state of California. And it was a whole thing that I'll save us the story of. But like, that was something I was like, it was after sitting with Kambo my first time for 3 days in a row. Right. And I was just like, this is the Kambo. But I've always had that trust again, like, right thing will work out. It might be painful, but the right thing will happen. But I do let people know, pay attention to what falls away. Ultimately, I find though, within that process, you can really develop a lot of trust for yourself, with things that are kind of going crazy and chaotic. And then also following up with those people who it's like, life my life is changing. Things are insane. Everything's leaving. Following up with them even a couple weeks later and just being like, hey, like last time we talked, this was happening. And again, just letting them know like they have support, they're not alone. I offer additional integration sessions if people want to come in for an additional session and have more one-on-one care. But I like always offer text support. Like I'm very communicative with my people. I find that it's really important in the combo space so that they don't have like this crazy experience and then they're just like out in the world trying to figure it out. But I find following up with them a couple weeks later and just noticing like, oh, your intention was this and now all of this shifted and this is like this is coming in. Do you see how this might have aligned with your intention here? And it can be pretty profound and be mind-blowing because people don't often realize when their intentions materialize because like they just leave them in the medicine journey and that's it. So it's a pretty cool thing.
What are some of your preferred methods or like suggested modalities of integration from a combo experience, especially for someone that might be unpacking a traumatic past?
That's a great question. So one thing that I tell people to do is just check in a little bit every day and ask yourself, what's different? Just what's different and see what comes up for you. So what I'm doing with that is I'm attuning them to subtlety, right? Subtle, like the most powerful the most powerful thing in the universe to me is subtlety. It's the building blocks of everything, and many of us have lost our connection to subtlety. And so just asking yourself, what's different? Another thing that I'll do is offer a lot of grounding techniques. Um, like how I mentioned earlier, I had the one woman who called me and it's like, I feel like the universe is making love to me. It's overwhelming. Like she was in a really blissed out euphoric state, but it was a little bit ungrounded. So it's just lay down in the grass, just get grounded. Um, Another thing that I offer oftentimes is community support, is so important. So maybe I link somebody to a grief circle, or maybe I link them to something else that I feel would be really suitable for them. It's up to them to take it if I give recommendations. Um, but I find just checking in with that what's different oftentimes will bring people into that grounded place, will bring people into a place where they can listen and they can navigate from their heart space. It's so simple. And I can go so much deeper with integration, but a lot of that depends on what their intention is. Is their intention to stop using a substance? Is their intention to stop a certain pattern that they have in their life with relationships? Is their intention to befriend and let go of their anger? That with that, I would give a little bit more of a customized approach to with how to basically implement their learnings from Kambo. But basically, if they learn how to listen, Kambo is such a primal medicine, it will guide you. It really puts you in your animal body and shows your body will show you very much so what works for you, what doesn't, if you're able to stay with that presence.
Awesome. I'm curious if you have any stories or examples, anonymized, of course, but yeah, where you've really seen Kambo be like such a positive intervention for someone who is experiencing the effects of trauma. Do you have any good juicy stories?
Yeah, let me check in here with what comes up for me. Oh man, I've got a lot. It's like which one do I want to share? And which one also would the person be comfortable with me sharing as well? So I had an experience with somebody who was having a really hard time dealing with some lineage trauma on her mother's side, and a certain level of alcoholism was present there, and just coming in such like a heightened and disempowered state. And like ultimately there's a lot of anger that was there. There was a lot of deeply suppressed anger. And Kambo is the great revealer. If there's something that is boiling under the surface, oftentimes it's what it'll bring up because it's what needs to be recognized. And so I've worked with her a lot. I've done 2 rounds of inoculations with her, and then I've done a couple of times in between. We've done integration sessions as well, which is how I prefer to do it. I try to get everybody to do integration sessions. It really, really helps. But basically, she had such a massive anger release during one of her ceremonies, and like like we were just like drumming on the ground and stuff like that, and just making all these sounds and giving space for that anger to come out in a way that was really appropriate. And then afterwards, and it was intense what was coming out, like
Mhm.
really intense. And then afterwards, she rested. She obviously looked really peaceful. She felt really good, but she just made all of these crazy shifts afterwards. Like she just stopped drinking. That wasn't part of her intention. But
Wow.
she admitted like that she struggled with alcohol dependency pretty strongly, and she just stopped completely. She stopped hanging out in places where there was a lot of alcohol. She joined more sober groups. And a lot of her relationships also began to shift as a result because she started to learn, okay, we're not bonding over this anymore. I'm wanting to bond over this thing or this thing or this thing. And then she also um, enrolled in like a holistic medicine school or something. Like it was a
Whoa.
pretty profound shift. And really I feel like what it came down to is like letting that anger be heard so that that anger could teach her what it needed to teach her, you know? It's also a pretty common thing that I serve medicine to people and then they won't drink for a while afterwards. They'll really cut down on different substances that are perhaps harming their body or that they might not have a healthy relationship with. That's really common with medicine, but her experience was really profound. I had another experience serving somebody who was breaking an addiction to toxic men, and
Mhm.
that was cool because I just felt like I just watched her bloom and blossom into who she is in so much vibrancy and develop much stronger and healthier relationships. And she thought she needed a man to accomplish all these things she wanted to in her life. Like one thing was get a dog. And so she really wanted a partner. And then she realized, like, wait, I don't need a man for this. I can just have the dog and I can just do these things and is in so much of a happier place. And I have full faith that that relationship will come into play, but like so much of it is like learning how to love yourself and giving yourself permission to do the things you want to do.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've also had a number of experiences where the person arrives to the combo for something pretty physical, like in their intention. They have Epstein-Barr, they have Lyme disease, they have this, they have depression, whatever it may be, and they're kind of just, treating it as an allopathic medicine. And then they go through the experience, and then there's that like critical window from the time that the points get removed and they're resting for 20 minutes or so. I find that that is actually like a magic plastic like period where someone really has access to deeper parts of their psyche and their soul. And I've found that like when they're sitting there resting, suddenly all this shit will come up that was never part of the reason that they showed up to do combo, at least not consciously. And I had a woman who had Epstein-Barr, was debilitated, was struggling. She flew in from Reno to San Diego, and we did 2 sessions with her, and it was interesting because she was there for the Epstein-Barr specifically, which it did clear completely, and she was in remission for 5 years. Um,
Oh,
but what was unexpected was it actually brought up a traumatic experience that she had had, I don't know, maybe 10 years prior, where someone had actually knocked on her door and asked to use her bathroom and then assaulted her in that process. And it was a very bizarre experience. That was a random act of violence essentially. And she ended up like journaling about it and like doing all this processing around it that she thought she had already done. But then her illness resolved like that. Uh,
oh,
or you get people that, they're there for the physical detox or whatever, and then they're lying on the mat, and then they start talking about this one time their mother yelled at them, or like all this like weird stuff, or even worse, like memories come up of being sodomized, or like I've heard all sorts of crazy stuff come out of people when they
yeah.
are in that really like sort of ethereal and open state. Have you had that experience?
I've totally had that experience so much, and a very similar one at one point with a woman who was really struggling with autoimmune. And while she was laying there, this memory came up, and she was like, I haven't thought about that in so long. And she kind of went into, after the medicine comes off, you can sometimes go into like a dream state with combo. And it came up like in her dream state, and she relived it, it like played the movie reel for her. And And it was profound. One of my favorite things when I get to work with people, especially people repeatedly or people who get integration sessions and we're doing more deep work together, combo is not a one and done thing, or very seldomly is a one and done thing. One experience can be potent and powerful, yes, but we need the proper integration. And oftentimes it's the relationship with combo and just that continuing to coming back to yourself to allow those deeper parts of you a place to speak and come out where the real power lies with this medicine. But like my favorite thing is just when I get to work with somebody like that more in depth, it's like I get to see like layers come off of them, and it's like you see them develop this kind of glow that just stays and permeates through their life. And I think so much of it is releasing ourselves from that contracted state. Trauma changes your epigenetics. It changes the different ways that your body displays whatever is in your DNA, when it comes to autoimmune conditions, when it comes to other things that we experience in our lives. Like trauma definitely affects our physiology on so many levels. And so learning to let go of that, learning to bring the nervous system down, I think also, on a more spiritual level is changing our frequency so that it's not as bogged down by the heaviness of these experiences, or maybe the heaviness of the experiences that our parents have gone through that are in our body, that's in our DNA too, that the lineage trauma that we carry, just being able to let that go and learn how good it feels to be in your heart space, to have the integration where you're able to tell what works for you, what doesn't, to be able to listen to those memories when they come up. I just I just see the most beautiful things happen for people, and they begin to live in better synchronicity and better communication with the rest of the universe, and better communication with the more challenging emotions that might come up, like their grief when they come to experience grief, or when these things arise that need to be taken care of. They're able to have more bandwidth to take care of those things on an internal level and to practice better self-care around it, or learn how to reach out to the right people for it. But they just become so vibrant. Like their eyes become more aware. It's so cool. It's like my favorite thing.
Yeah, it's like watching them be on this upward spiral as they create more momentum and more spaciousness. And, then they're able to nourish themselves better and regulate themselves better and make different choices about their food or their habits or their relationships. And then they get better. And then the psyche starts to kind of release and allow percolation of these like more, stuffed down feelings to emerge. And then people start to actually get,
Oh, you froze.
uh-oh.
We're back. There was a freeze.
Did I so your internet connection is unstable. Better not be. Um, what was I saying? Um, yeah, just like the more that we, do this emotional work, but also like finding the neurological sense of safety and regulation, and then we start making better decisions like around our diet or our habits or our relationships or our thoughts even, and then our physical body starts to also gain vitality, which then I find the psyche will start to actually feel that it has the capacity to face these painful memories or whatnot that have been suppressed, and they'll start to percolate up. It's almost like the zipper effect where you're kind of like then oscillating step by step between nourishing your physical being so that it's like a safe haven for the thoughts and the feelings and the pain to actually be witnessed and processed without overwhelming the system on a physical level. Um, I was gonna say something else, but I like totally blanked. I can edit this part out. um,
It went.
yeah. Anyways, I wanted to ask you something and I just don't remember. Sorry, we can just continue if you have any comments.
I also think about, I had this one woman that I worked with, and we worked together over the span of like 2.5 years, and I ended up teaching her how to microdose. And it was so wild because she came in and she had no libido at all whatsoever. She really struggled with addiction. Um, she was really sick very frequently. And I just remember we were in ceremony and these memories came up about ways that she had been bullied. And she was like, I haven't experienced trauma. Like I haven't experienced any of these things in my life. And then she starts talking about like all these experiences being bullied as a kid and being rejected. I'm like, that is trauma. Like that is actively trauma. I think that it's important that we recognize like capital T trauma for what it is, which is like, big stuff, but lowercase t trauma can be just as harmful oftentimes because it just goes under the radar, and people don't get any kind of support for it. And a lot of the lowercase t trauma is stuff that can be like more recurring too. Um, and can lead I mean, both can lead to complex PTSD, but um the lowercase t trauma is important to recognize. But it was awesome because while working with her, like over the past several years, she's lost so much weight. She looks so fit. She got into moving her body. She's in touch with her sexuality in so many healthy ways and is very empowered by it. She's been totally sober, and like and she's like another person who I think of, and I'm just like, yeah, she just glows now. Like she just glows now. And I think so much of it is just like learning to be more comfortable and solid in yourself and learning how to listen to yourself and yeah, shutting away narratives that have been embedded in us and recognizing the difficult experiences that we've gone through as what they were, which is difficult experiences.
That's amazing. Yeah, and you kind of just backing up a little bit, you were talking about some people that have like physical illnesses, and I work a lot with people with chronic illnesses, and it is just so blatantly obvious from, not only from like an intuitive perspective, but from a scientific perspective, the data is there that there is an intimate connection between trauma, especially childhood trauma, and disease. And so sometimes people do come to you as a Kambo practitioner, they want to address their disease, and they might not actually be fully prepared to address or acknowledge trauma yet. But if we're going to be working with people that have physical ailments, especially like autoimmune related things, which are rampant and widespread, and there's so many expressions of that, we have to look at the deeper poetry, which is the person's body is attacking themselves. And like you said, being at war with yourself is incredibly corrosive on a mental, spiritual, and physical level. And so I think marrying the concepts of like, the mind, body, spirit connection is an important facet of being trauma informed, because some people might have their trauma buried so deeply that it has just festered into these physical manifestations of disease and autoimmune mechanisms and infections and things like that. And sometimes people fail to recognize the connection there. So I think that is equally important in the whole field of Kambo and trauma informed care.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think about it again is like, if we're in the state of hyperarousal, or there's also hypoarousal. Hyperarousal is like fight, flight. Hypoarousal is like freeze, fawn, right? They're both trauma responses. Um, they're a little bit different. One's more up, one's more down, but they're both trauma responses. But when we go into these states again, like our body perceives that we are in a threat. Like we are threatened. It sees no difference between that and getting mauled by a saber-toothed tiger, right? And again, our body shuts down these critical systems in order to save and reserve energy for survival. We literally go into survival mode. And one of the things that I live by is survival mode is not a good place to live in. And trust me, I've lived in survival mode a long time. Off and on, I've been in survival mode. It's a wonderful thing, the resilience of the human body and the resilience of the spirit and the resilience of the soul. And also survival mode, not a good place to be. And on a physical level, it shuts down all these critical systems. It affects your endocrine system. It affects your digestive system. It affects, which is literally the way you are getting nutrients, and you're not absorbing proper nutrients if you're in that survival mode. And if the digestive tract is shut down, learning stress regulation is such a powerful tool for that. But sometimes we need something more potent, and Kambo can be that more potent thing because it kind of like forces it in a way, and I just think that the spirit of the frog is one that is so cleansing and so compassionate and has a really weird sense of humor that can like just really like kind of like force us into the submission of calm in a way, through the process of letting go. And at the same time, all the different peptides coming into your system, reawakening all of these different things that might have been shut off previously in your body. Again, your endocrine system works on the pituitary axis, working on cleansing your liver, where it holds on to all of these different toxins that it's cleared from your body, so many different ways, bringing you back into that place where you feel good, where your systems are back online. That can be absolutely revolutionary for somebody's health and for their overall way of well-being. It's hard to know what you're seeking. It's hard to know how to come into health or wellness if you've never experienced that. Like, how are you supposed to know? It's like explaining colors to a blind person?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Kambo is such an immense tool for all of those things. It's just, love it.
Yay, we love frog. One thing I get a kick out of is just thinking about like the indigenous, users of this medicine, they are not using it for trauma. Like,
No,
because trauma is probably not even a concept in their worldview. It's probably honestly a part of like a normal part of their life, depending on, where they're coming from and kind of how deep in the jungle. I just think about like the Matses in particular, where so many of the women, Matses women that I know were like kidnapped from other tribes and their villages were, slaughtered by the Matses and stuff like that. So trauma was just probably a way of life for them. And to my understanding, there wasn't really a traditional application of Kambo specifically for healing like psychological or psychospiritual trauma oriented afflictions. Um, so I just think it's really cool how it's been adapted to and evolved and innovated into a tool that helps people in the modern, you know, Western societies. Because whether we like it or not, Kambo's left the jungle and it does have a different application outside of the jungle because life is different outside of the jungle and there's different needs and different levels of resilience and different worldviews and biology and all sorts of different things between a Matses person and a American, for example. So I was just reflecting on like just how cool it is to kind of watch like Kambo reclaim its autonomy and have its own agenda and be like, yeah, okay, like it was cool hanging out in the jungle and like being used as a hunting aid, but like I'm ready for something bigger in the world. And they like went out into the world and now it is like doing something that I think is like even more deep and profound for humanity, which is addressing all this pain and wrongdoing that people have experienced and helping them reclaim their power and raise their consciousness. So I think Frog's on a mission, and I think it's fun to watch.
frog has wings. I think it was like on a post that you or River or Anura made, but something about flying on the wings of the frog. And I say that all the time because I'm like the frog does have wings and it is on a mission and it's such an awesome spirit to work with. And I think it also shows like the adaptability of traditional medicines, right? Like I think about this in like traditional Chinese medicine, and as there's been a diaspora of it across the world, like applications of it has changed. Or yoga is a big one, right? Yoga, how we do it in California, not how they do it in India. I studied yoga in India back in 2017, 2018 when I first met Kambo, was I was living in India studying yoga, way different. And I think that it's what's profound about these practices is that they go out in the world and they adapt to where a culture is at and what a culture needs. And there are obviously some issues when it comes to cultural appropriation or misuse. I just hope and just pray for Kambo to always be served in safe hands with people who have adequate training, who know their capabilities or who know their shortcomings. But it's one that just I've seen just give so much healing to, and just sometimes the ways that people come in to receive Kambo, it's also so magical. Like there have been so many people I've met who I tell them what I do. They're like, I've never felt called to sit with Kambo, but all of a sudden, yes, let's do it. Or like I'll tell them about what I do, and then all of a sudden they're like dreaming of frogs, and there's frogs everywhere, and it's just it comes in such an awesome way. I have a question for you though, Pony, and that's like when it comes to this idea of Panama, right? Like the low vibes that Kambo can clear and cleanse. Like would you see, is this something that is practiced with the Matses or more so with other tribes in the Amazon? And then also, could this trauma that it cleanses be part of cleansing that Panama?
Yeah, it's so funny that you asked me about this because I literally just created a post the other day. It hasn't been posted yet, but I like wrote it out, and it was about Panema and kind of looking at it through Western lens of like what is the equivalent of that from a Western perspective. And um, I'm not entirely clear, but I do think that's mostly a concept from the Katukina or Noki Koi, like some of the original users of Kambo. I've never heard the Matses talk about Panema, so it's a little bit tricky to figure out where the source of that concept actually comes from because there's not a lot of documentation and there's just so much misinformation all over the internet. Um, but yeah, I think in my mind, when I think about like what Panema represents, or like when someone who's experiencing Panema or has that kind of funk, like what's going on a physiological, neurological level, right? And I see someone who's probably chronically inflamed, probably has dysbiosis. Maybe there's a presence of like chronic infections, nutritional deficiencies. Like I can just envision them as like someone who's like out of balance, depleted, and not in homeostasis, not vital. And that could be due to trauma, right? Because all those things are kind of downstream effects, can be downstream effects of trauma. Or, maybe someone was susceptible and then a trauma happens to them and then they didn't have the resourcing to be as resilient and move through it or process it, and then therefore the imprint of that trauma is more substantial. So yeah, I kind of interpret Panema as like this physiological equivalent of like low level, like just inflammation, systemic inflammation, which could be caused for a variety of reasons. Um, but they're just not feeling good. They're out of balance and perhaps in like the early stages of developing disease down the road if this persists. And so Kambo is it's so like unique because it provides a customized experience. And from a scientific perspective, I love that the peptides in combo seem to really modulate these keystone systems in the body that have central regulating effects on all of these major systems. And I find that they can kind of turn on the body's own intelligence and activate these pathways that are very intricately designed with feedback mechanisms in order to modulate and, monitor levels of certain pathways in a way that's balanced. And so that's why I think Cambo is so actually attuned to each individual, is because it's going to the core of where the modulation's actually happening to create these customized approaches based on what that particular system needs in order to be back in homeostasis. So, yeah, I think Kambo restores homeostasis to an imbalanced, dysregulated system. And I think that's kind of what Panema is when we are in that dysfunctional, out of balance state. And then Kambo can kind of energetically and physically rebalance that person's whole being. And, when we change our physiology, our spirit and our emotions, our psyche, everything change, right? It's all like a ripple effect. Of course, they're all intricately linked. So it makes sense to me. But yeah, I think that's kind of my ponderings about Panema for now.
Oh, good. It's so fascinating. It really reminds the body of its own intelligence. And it's like why I call combo like such a primal medicine. Like if we are able to oftentimes like just get our mind out of it, which I tell people in the days following combo, I'm like, just put as much goodness into your life as you can. Like, bring as much goodness into your life as you can. If something approaches you that takes away some of your combo glow, I'm like, I call it the acute integration period is 3 to 5 days. I tell people, don't avoid the problems in your life, but if something comes into your sphere in those days that takes away your combo glow or that your body's just like a no to, put it to the side and really just focus on the goodness, on feeding your body goodness in all ways, food, music, relationships, nature, all of it, because the body knows. It knows. It just oftentimes needs reminded and attunement, and combo is wonderful for that. So I love that you spoke about it.
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. Um,
Yeah.
well, it's been just like such a lovely conversation with you, and I imagine it's probably a good time for us to wrap up. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share? Just like, any like major takeaways that you want people to walk away from this conversation with?
Oh, thank you. There's so many. I'm honestly feeling sad because I'm having so much fun having this conversation with you, and I don't want it to come to an end. Like, I love your energy. I love your knowledge with Kambo. I love how you have such a profound connection between the science of Kambo, and the original carriers and the ways that they serve the medicine, and just you put words to things so well. I'm getting so much out of this, and I'm loving it.
Awesome.
What I can say is I do run trauma informed care and intro to trauma informed care workshops for combo practitioners. I've got one coming up in conjunction with you or in collaboration with you and Medicine and Frog Combo, and we can put all of that information in the show notes. The intro to trauma informed care workshop is a 3 hour long workshop. Again, it's an intro to trauma informed care, but it is one that I think every single combo practitioner and really every single space holder should listen to, just to be able to spot those signs of trauma and to learn how it affects the nervous system. What is trauma? Again, it's not just these mental loops, right? It is something else entirely. It's very much so in the body. And so learning how to spot those things and some guardrails with how to work with them, it will improve your practice. It also will improve the relationships in your life and perhaps improve a little bit of compassion that we might need for ourselves when it comes to post-traumatic growth too. So I highly recommend that people check that out. I am putting together a 5 day long workshop that is more in depth for combo practitioners. Not sure when that will come out, but please check out the intro first. You can also connect with me at moonflowercombo.com. My Instagram handle is Jetta Moonflower. And I'm deeply passionate about this work. If you have any questions, send me emails. Follow me on social media, send me a direct message. I'm happy to be in communication. And lastly, any takeaways? Biggest takeaway for me that's coming up is just to, really encourage people to continue to hold the reverence for combo, but also for the way combo is served. Like it is such a sacred position that we're in, where people approach us to literally go through some of the most vulnerable experiences in their whole lives. Like, how wild is that they trust us to hold them through extreme vulnerability? And that role demands reverence, that role demands respect, that role demands that we know what is in our capability and where we need to improve our capabilities, or maybe where we need to refer out to somebody else. And so getting in touch with that in your role as a practitioner and somebody who is of service is just so needed and will help you gain better trust in your practice and ultimately in yourself.
Thank you, Jetta. That's so beautiful. Yeah, it's been such a joy to chat with you. And, we definitely went longer than usual, but I was just having so much fun. And I felt like there was just so much good conversation to be had. So hopefully people will just appreciate the extra bonus time that we gave them. And yeah, and I'll post all of her contact information in the show notes, and then we'll have more announcements soon about her available workshops. And I highly recommend it. I went to the 3 hour intro one and found it to be really cool, and really offers a lot of great perspectives for people that are leading people through any sort of vulnerable experience. So Jetta, thank you so much. It's been such a joy. And thank you, everyone who listened. And yeah, feel free to follow us on the different platforms so that you can stay updated on other Frogcast episodes as they come out. We release about one a month. So yeah, stay tuned for more Kambo conversations.